Good morning, everyone.
Good morning, sir.
Morning.
So, today is lecture number 11 of this advanced concept in steel technology. And today's topic is like image of coherent and incoherent precipitates, image showing shearing, cutting, and Horvan mechanism, problems at high temperature for metallic materials with precipitates, and solution, heat treatment classification, predetermined temperature and soaking temperature for different type of steels. So you can see this is an image showing coherent precipitate. You can see these are very small particles. Hmm. But the interesting point here is you can see if this is the size of the particle, but it is not exactly the size of the particle. It is appearing like it is big. It is like this much, but the actual size of the particle is very small. Actually, this is a transmission electron micrograph, and this is a image of strain field. If there is any strain field around the materials in transmission electron microscope, we can able to see the strain fields. So basically these are strain fields. Due to these strain fields, we can see the particle size here. Actually this is not the particle size, the particle size is very small. And you can see this is image showing a bigger particles, incoherent particles, and you can see dislocation interaction is there. The dislocation is interacting with the bigger particles here. You can able to see the dislocation here. This is dislocations. Dislocations. Now this is a very good image which shows dislocation and particle interaction. Basically, if you remember in the previous lecture, we have discussed what happened to the precipitate particle when it is small and coherent. And this is, you can see this is the dislocation. This is the plane on which dislocation is gliding. The dislocation is now interacting with the precipitate, and this is the consequence of that. What is happening, you can see the dislocation is shearing or cutting the precipitate particle if it is small and coherent one, right? And it is coming out now here. This is a real image. This is a TEM image. You can see this is a very good image. You can see. Suppose this type of particles are already present over here, and the dislocation is gliding in this direction in this slip plane. So what is happening? It is just shearing it. Right? Particle has been sheared. Or suppose dislocation is moving in this direction. It is shearing the particle into two halves. You can see this is one half. This is one half. This is one half. This is one half. And you can able to see what is happening here. We are creating a new surface. A new interface is created. This one and this one. Right? Initially, this is the only surface available. An interface is there in between the matrix and the precipitate. But now there is a new interface is created, additional interface. That leads to increase in the interfacial energy. And once the interfacial energy increases, the dislocation cannot move easily. It will get restricted and you need more stress to move the dislocation. And this is a very beautiful image. You can see this is a dislocation. You can see dislocation line. You can say this the dislocation is moving here, and these are the precipitate particle present over here. And this distance between from the center of the particle is L, and in between the distance in between the particle the distance is L minus 2r because it is radius is r. This location is moving like this, and it is interacting with the particles. Now what is happening, you can see the dislocation is bowing. This is called bowing of dislocation. The particle size is bigger, so dislocation is bowing around the particle, and finally it is forming a loop, and dislocations come out. And dislocation again, it will move easily, or it will glide easily in the material. But result is what you can able to see. The result is the distance between the dislocation is decreasing now. Why? Because due to formation of a loop. So the distance between the two particles is now from this loop to this loop. Suppose any other dislocation will cross away, it will form another loop, right? And the distance between the particle again decreases. Further, what will happen when a new dislocation want to move? It cannot move. It requires more stress to overcome this distance. That means you understand the strength increases if this one decreases. L minus 2R. The same thing is explained over here. This is a very beautiful image. You can again see this is a dislocation. This is a precipitated particle. This is a precipitated particle. Distance between them is L, and distance between them is L minus 2R. But distance from this center of this particle to this center of this particle is L. It is getting bowing. It is forming a loop. And how strength is depending on this. You can see strength is equal to G into B by L minus 2R. So L minus 2R is the distance between the particle. If it is decreasing, strength is increasing. Now there is a very interesting point over here. What happens to the precipitate at very high temperature? So suppose you have a precipitation strengthening steel, and you are using that steel at a very high temperature, like 1000 degree, 1200 degree, like that. But this is not possible. This is very difficult. We cannot use. We have to use. Basically super alloys. Suppose the temperature is high, for example 800 900 degrees centigrade, like that. So what will happen exactly? You can see, we understand when the temperature is very high, diffusivity is high, rate of diffusion is faster, coarsening of the precipitate will take place. So this is the problem we will face when we are using our material at a very high temperature and the material is having the precipitates. So the point is what? The precipitate will start coarsening up with time due to high temperature. Why it is happening? Due to diffusion. Diffusion is happening at a high temperature. Now, what is the mechanism of precipitate coarsening or particle coarsening? The mechanism is called Ostwald ripening. I would love to show you a video right now. Just look at this video. I think yes, just look at this video. Very interesting video. You can see this is the original particle. There is another particle here. There is another particle here. You can see how the size of the particle is increasing. Just look at the particles. See the particle, the bigger particle is engulfing the smaller particles. And this is now bigger and this is smaller particle. It will get engulfed by this bigger particle. Again, it is increasing. Again, you can see this particle may engulf other particles, smaller particles. Yes, look at this one. It will get consumed by this bigger particle. Okay, this is over. Let me see any video I have. Oh. Look at another video. Just look at the smaller particles and bigger particles. Carefully look at the bigger particles and smaller particles. You can able to see what the bigger particles will become more bigger and more bigger with time, whereas the smaller particle will get disappeared. Can you able to see the bigger particle is engulfing the smaller particles and it is becoming more bigger, and the smaller particle is getting disappeared. So what will happen at the end of the time? You will be having more bigger particles. See, the bigger particle is becoming more bigger with time. Okay. Just look at this one. We will left with more bigger particles. Smaller particles getting disappeared with time. Right. So you understand this mechanism called Ostwald ripening. Ostwald ripening is a mechanism in which the particles or the precipitate become coarser with time. So what is happening? So you will be having smaller particles and bigger particles, or you are having bigger precipitate and coarser precipitates. The coarser precipitates will consume the smaller precipitates, fine precipitates, and they become more bigger. With time, what will happen? Smaller particles will get disappeared, or smaller precipitate will get disappeared from the matrix. We'll be left with more bigger or coarser particles, which decreases the strength. So you understand the gap between the particles will decrease because the volume fraction is fixed. So if less number of particles will be there, so we have left with bigger particles, and the gap between or the space between the particles decreases. So dislocation will find easy way to cross away the particles. The strength will decrease like this. Already written over here. Consequence of this: for same volume fraction of precipitate, the space between the precipitate become more, and the size of the precipitate become bigger. So here decreasing the strength of the material occurs, right? So now what is the solution to this? The solution to this is, so instead of using precipitation strengthening materials, we can have a different kind of strengthening. Or we can do what? We can do two kind of strengthening in that material when our service temperature is very high, like 1000 degree, 1100 degree, 1200 degree. So solution is this one. So before, okay, okay, fine. Okay, moving in, before moving into that topic, we'll see the alloy designing parameters for high temperature applications. So when the service temperature is very high, so what should be the designing parameter? So this is your designing parameter, dr by dt. Here r is the size of the particles, t is the time. So here rate of particle coarsening. So here dr by dt is nothing but the rate of particle coarsening, or precipitate coarsening. So the rate of coarsening is depending upon the d, which is the diffusivity. So that means if the diffusivity is very high, the particle will become more coarser with time. And depend upon the interfacial energy. If the interfacial energy is more, the particle become more coarser. then depend upon Xc. This is very interesting parameter, Xc, which is nothing but equilibrium solubility. If the equilibrium solubility of the particle in the matrix is more, then it become more coarser. But rate of particle coarsening dr by dt is inversely proportional to r square here. R square. R square here means basically it depends upon the average size of the particle. If the average size of the particle is smaller, the particle become more coarser with time. But if the average particle size is bigger, it will not coarser much, right? But interesting point here, we have to notice this one, Xc, equilibrium solubility. So it is written in between coherent and incoherent, which grows faster. Actually, coherent particles and incoherent particles, basically incoherent particles grows faster because due to high interfacial energy they have. This one. But coherent particle size is smaller. But if it is of intermediate size, then it is good. But if it is very small, it will grow faster. Basically, incoherent particles grows faster because of high interfacial energy they have. To minimize the interfacial energy, they become bigger and bigger. And if you remember, the incoherent particles takes spherical shape so that they can minimize the interfacial energy. And there is a very interesting figure over here. This is hardness HB, or this is Vickers hardness HB versus aging time of aging. If you remember, the aging means we will allow the material to be there at a relatively low temperature so that precipitate will start forming. A precipitation will occur on the matrix phase. So you can see these are very good, interesting plots we have. So this is for low temperature. Sorry, this is for high temperature plot, and this is for low temperature. So observation is common. You can see that means with increasing the aging time from 0 time to increasing the aging time, we can see the hardness and the strength is increasing, and it just reaches to a peak value. Again, it decreases with the aging time. So that means we have that means in our material we should give an optimum time for the aging so that we can get a maximum hardness or maximum strength. So for this one, this is an intermediate temperature. For this one, this is the perfect aging time we have. And for this one, this is the perfect aging time. And the conclusion we can get is, if we keep a very low temperature, relatively low temperature, we can get maximum strength and hardness. But the aging time will be more because this is a peak hardness value here. But if you keep a high temperature, the peak value is this one, which is lower than this one, this value. And this is happening, you understand, if we are maintaining a relatively high temperature, the rate of precipitation is increasing and the peak hardness is this one. Now you can see this is a very interesting figure where we can see volume fraction of the precipitate decreases with increasing in the temperature. Right? As I told, for a same volume fraction of precipitate, the size of the precipitate will become more, but the volume fraction is decreasing. How? You can see this is the temperature, this is the composition axis, this is one of the part of your what? Can anybody remember this image is showing which kind of phase diagram, or this is a part of which kind of phase diagram? Which kind of alloy? Single phase alloy or two phase alloy?
So eutectic.
I'm asking two phase alloy system or single phase alloy?
Two phase.
Yes, two phase. So you can able to see here what is happening. You understand this is your solvus line. This is a single phase and this is the two phase resin. And if you remember, if this is the composition of your alloy, this much is the extent of supersaturation from this one to this one. And you can able to see the extent of supersaturation is this much and this much and this much. With this is a temperature direction, right? So that means with increasing in the temperature, the extent of supersaturation is decreasing. So that means what is happening? Volume fraction of the precipitate is decreasing. That is the answer with increasing in the temperature. And now look at this image and this image. This is an alloy A, this is an alloy B, and can anybody tell me in between alloy A and alloy B where the precipitation coarsening will be faster? You have to compare this equation. Look at this equation with this image. In between alloy A and alloy B, in which case precipitation coarsening will be faster? Again, this is the temperature axis, this is the composition axis, and this is the solvus line we have. This is the solvus line we have. And this is a single phase region, you may call it alpha. This is also the single phase region, you can call it alpha. And this is the mixture of two phase. This is also the mixture of two phase region. Just look at this equation and tell me. dr by dt, rate of particle coarsening. So rate of particle coarsening will be faster in which alloy? This one or this one? Few minutes before I told something in this equation. I can give you a hint, is this one at least. Now let me see you can answer. Hint is this one. Equilibrium solubility. And look at this one and this one.
Alloy B.
Alloy B, very good. Why alloy B?
Equilibrium solubility.
Equilibrium solubility?
ସେ ଜାଗାରେ equilibrium solubility ଅଛି ଏର ମାର୍କରେ ଶୋ କରୁଛି
Very good. What is it showing? Tell me.
more solubility with equilibrium ମାନେ equilibrium solubility होची but single phase एरो मार्क जोड़ा अछि एपड सहित equilibrium अछि एरो मार्क इक्वल अछि.
Tapas, you are right, but you cannot able to explain. You can see the solubility limit is more in this case, in this alloy, right? At same temperature. I am taking a same temperature, for example, this one. Here equilibrium solubility is less, right? Equilibrium solubility you understand from this point to this point only. From here to here, this is the equilibrium solubility. So equilibrium solubility is more in this case. So if in alloy B equilibrium solubility is more, then what will happen to the particle coarsening? Rate of particle coarsening. It will increase. It is directly proportional to Xc.
Yes sir, yes.
Right. So solubility, you understand, this is a single phase. That is why there is a solubility. But here there is no proper solubility. So that's why we have two phase region. Okay. Anyways. Now what is the solution, as I told? So what is the solution at high temperature? So if we have a very high temperature application, or if the service temperature is very high, in that case we can go for dispersion strengthening, or we can go for both dispersion strengthening and precipitation strengthening. Like in case of superalloys, nickel based superalloys, we have both precipitation strengthening and dispersion strengthening. But you can only use dispersion strengthening also. Dispersion strengthening, here we are using dispersoid. Dispersoid are particles, foreign particles. we are intentionally adding some foreign particles, which are basically oxides, like TiO2 particles, yttrium oxides particles, thorium oxides particles, titanium oxides particles. Like these are very hard particles and foreign particles. So we are intentionally adding into the materials, which are acting as a dispersoid. Right? So dispersion strengthening instead of precipitation strengthening, or combination of both, you can write. Yeah, already I have written. For what is the reason behind the strengthening? You can see for dispersion strengthening, Xc equilibrium solubility is 0. So these oxides particles, TiO2, yttrium oxides, thorium oxides, these particles will not become soluble in the matrix. So if they will be not become soluble in the matrix, what will happen? Strength will remain more. They will not become coarser, right? Now, okay, just look at this figure. So dispersion strengthening due to dispersion of oxides particles, which leads to dislocation dispersed particles interaction. Okay. So matrix phase in dispersion strengthening material is basically iron and nickel. Anyways, dispersion phase, it may be alumina, it may be yttria, it may be thoria. These are called oxide dispersion strengthening material, ODS. So we can have ODS steel also. ODS steel have very important applications in nuclear industries. Like nuclear industry requires because the service temperature in nuclear power plant is very high. So we need a steels. Those are called ODS steels, oxide dispersion strengthening steels, where the steel matrix will be having dispersoid of oxides particles, which are very hard, like yttrium oxides and TiO2 particles. Basically, we are using over there. Here it is written. You can see why ODS steels are alloy for high temperature application, not precipitation strengthening. Particles remain stable, not dissolve at very high temperature, but precipitation particles dissolve at high temperature or grows bigger, right? So now another question is, what happens to the material at very high temperature? So that is another point. Grain boundary coarsening, or not grain boundary, the grain coarsening will occur. So that means the strength will decrease, right? At high temperature, grain also tends to grow. So now question is how to prevent the grain growth at high temperature. So you can do what? You can, if you people have heard about microalloyed steel, where we are using a very little amount of alloying elements like vanadium and niobium or titanium sometimes, right? So vanadium, niobium, titanium, they form strong carbides and strong nitrides, and the melting point of these carbides and nitrides are very high. They will not become soluble in the matrix at high temperature. They remain stable at high temperature. So what they do basically, they pin the grain boundaries. So the moment they are pinning the grain boundaries, the grain boundary cannot migrate or it cannot grow into bigger size. So pinning of the grain boundary increases the strength also at high temperature. It is called grain boundary pinning by these particles, carbides and nitrides of vanadium, niobium, and titanium. So that means we can prevent grain coarsening also at high temperature by adding these alloying elements, nickel, vanadium, titanium, niobium, right? So that's why we can have if we have a steel containing vanadium and titanium and nickel and niobium, we basically get a finer grain materials. You can understand. Even at high temperature, our grain size is finer due to pinning effect of this carbides and nitrates. And there is a very interesting fact over here. This is a very good image. You can see PFZ particle free zone. Particle free zone means this zone, you can see this is a grain boundary, right? This is a grain boundary, you can see. Here the grain boundaries is having precipitates here, bigger precipitates. But near to the grain boundaries now we have no precipitates here. We have no precipitates here. So depleted region. Here precipitate is absent. Here you can see, so initially we have a grain boundary, now precipitate is forming on the grain boundaries and it is becoming bigger and bigger. How it will become bigger? If it will take solute from the nearby area. So by absorbing solutes from the nearby area, the precipitate is becoming bigger and bigger on the grain boundaries. But this area will become depleted with the precipitates. So that's why it is called particle free zone or precipitate free zone. So if precipitate will remain absent in this area, what will happen to the strength in this area? It will increase or decrease?
So decrease.
Obviously decrease. So that is one of the consequence. If we have a precipitate free zones, that area will be having what? Lower strength. Dislocation can easily move and fracture may happen in this area, right? And the point may be happen what exactly? Corrosion may take place. Why corrosion may take place? Because this area is depleted with precipitates, but this area is having precipitates, right? So a galvanic cell may form, right? Due to different nature, a galvanic cell may form and galvanic corrosion will start, right? So that basically this happens due to heterogeneous nucleation conditions. If particles are not forming everywhere in the materials and there is an heterogeneous nucleation, there is some preferential sites to form precipitates, this kind of situation may happen. Formation of a galvanic cell may happen and corrosion may take place, right? Two things are happening. One is decreasing in the strength in the precipitate free zone, and the one is a galvanic cell may form over there, right? Okay, I'll so this topic is end. We have successfully end the topic strengthening mechanism, where we have seen strengthening due to grain boundary, strengthening due to dislocation point defect interaction, and we have seen also dislocation interaction leads to the strain, that is strain hardening, and dislocation point defect interaction, that means solid solution strengthening. And also we have seen some transformation strengthening, where we, if in the earlier class we have seen, we have convert our austenite into martensite or benite, which are very harder phases, very strong phase, which can increase the strength of the material because formation of these fine plates of martensite or benites, right? Finer structures, right? And also we have seen dislocation particle interactions, that may be a precipitate or maybe a dispersoid, right? That is called precipitation strengthening and dispersion strengthening. So we have finished the topic here, right? Now we'll move to the new topic, that is heat treatment. I think you people have a better understanding of heat treatment in your undergraduate. So if you remember, Acha, can you people tell me what are the different cycles which involves in a heat treatment, or in a heat treatment, what are the different cycles we have? Or what are the different stages of a heat treatment? If you want to heat treat a steel, so what is the different stages we have?
Sir, annealing, normalizing.
Okay. So basically these are different types of heat treatment. I'm not asking different types. I'm asking what are different stages. Suppose I will hand over you a sample, steel sample, and I want you to normalizing, annealing, or anything, any heat treatment. So in which stage the steel will go?
Heating stage, cooling stage.
Very good. Heating stage will be there. Next.
So soaking stage.
Soaking, yes. Soaking stage. Soaking stage. Any other name? Any common name of soaking
Holding
stage?
stage.
Holding stage. Very good. And final stage is?
Cooling stage.
Cooling stage.
Cooling stage. Okay, fine. Very good. So we have three cycles involved in a heat treatment. You give any heat treatment, basically they involve 3 cycles. You can repeat cycles in some specific heat treatment, but basically we have 3 cycles. First is the heating stage, second one is the holding or the soaking stage, and finally we are doing cooling. And if you remember the basic concepts, heating cycles, we have to take the samples to a predetermined temperature. Basically, in steels, what is the predetermined temperature? Can anybody tell me quickly?
Again, sir.
What is the predetermined temperature for steels basically? Predetermined temperature, I told what? What I told about predetermined temperature?
Uniform temperature.
Yes, uniform temperature. I told predetermined temperature means in the heating stage or in the soaking stage, to which point I am taking my sample. So what is the predetermined temperature for steels? They're very simple questions. Very simple. You do normalizing, you do annealing, you do hardening, any kind of heat treatment you do, you are taking the steel to a particular temperature. That is our predetermined temperature, right? And we are holding that sample
Sir,
in
that
that condition. What?
austenitic temperature, A1 temperature.
Yes. Sorry. What you are saying?
Sir, A1 temperature, sir.
A1 temperature?
To that, sir, single phase region, austenite.
Yes, to single phase reason, to austenite. Very good. Why you are saying A1 temperature? You can say if you can justify like this. If we have a eutectoid steel, then we have to go above A1, not A1, not below A1 or not A1, above A1. Basically,
Yes, sir.
30 to 40 degree above A1 or 50 degree above A1 if it is an eutectoid steel, and condition is there, eutectoid. But if it is not an eutectoid, if it is a hyper, then condition is different. You cannot say above A1 or below A1 or at A1. Anyways, the predetermined temperature basically for the steels is austenitizing temperature. Simple answer. Single phase austenite reason, which may be above A1, which may be above A3 or ACM, depending upon the composition of the steel. Right?
Yes, sir.
Okay. So different classes of steels different classes of heat treatment we have. So we can classify the heat treatment into two categories. One is bulk heat treatment and one is surface heat treatment. So what is the difference between bulk heat treatment and surface heat treatment? Bulk means from the surface of the steel to the center of the steel, again from the center of the steel to the surface of the steel, everywhere the steel must be at austenitizing temperature or predetermined temperature or holding temperature. The temperature should be uniform everywhere throughout the bulk. Right? So that is called bulk heat treatment. So entire bulk of the steel will be at the transformation temperature. Right? But in what is surface heat treatment? Surface heat treatment is only the surface, not the inside part or not the center, right? Not the core. Only the case or only the surface will be at transformation temperature. So that's why it is called surface heat treatment. It may be 1 mm, 2 mm from the surface to the bulk, but it is not like entire bulk will be at the austenitizing temperature or at the soaking temperature or at the transformation temperature, right? So that is the difference between bulk and surface heat treatment. And bulk heat treatment classifications are like this: annealing, normalizing, hardening, tempering, mar-tempering, austempering. These are many classes of bulk heat treatments, right? Surface heat treatments classification is another two types. One is thermal and one is thermochemical. Thermal and thermochemical, right? Thermal, you understand, here only heat is involved, right? The surface of the steel will be at the transformation temperature. There will be no chemicals involved. But in thermochemical, we have heat as well as some chemicals are involved. It may be carbon, it may be nitrogen, it can be combination of carbon and nitrogen atmosphere around it. So that's why it can be classified into carburizing, nitriding, and carbonitriding. Carburizing, carbon is involved, nitriding, nitrogen is involved, carbonitriding, both carbon and nitrogen is involved here, right? So here thermal heat treatment are classified as flame hardening, induction hardening, laser hardening, electrobeam hardening. So here only temperature is involved, high temperature, transformation temperature is involved. Now you can see here annealing heat treatment can be classified into full annealing, recrystallization annealing, stress relieving annealing, and spheroidizing annealing. So these are different classes of annealing heat treatment. We'll see that in the coming class, maybe in details. So I think people have understood this part, and next we'll move to this one: predetermined temperature and soaking temperature. For different heat treatments, right? You can see, can anybody tell me which diagram is this? Which kind of phase diagram is this? Suppose this is for steel. So which phase diagram is this? Which phase diagram is this?
Eutectic, sir.
Eutectic. Are you sure this is an eutectic phase diagram? Yeah, this is showing eutectic phase diagram, but my point is, which exactly phase diagram is this? Which system? Between which system?
Iron carbide.
Yes, obviously this is a part of iron carbon phase diagram. That's all. We haven't. I haven't shown you all the entire phase diagram. I've shown you some part of this phase diagram, which is important for heat treatment, right? If somebody will ask, draw a iron carbon phase diagram, which is only required for heat treatment. So you have to draw this kind of diagram. You do not have to complete the diagram. This diagram is enough to explain heat treatment. That can be explained you the predetermined temperature. Predetermined temperature is transformation temperature, you understand, basically, or the temperature to which we are taking our steel during our heat treatment. And soaking temperature, obviously. After reaching to the predetermined temperature, we have to soak it, or we have to hold it for sufficient time. You understand, this is alpha region, this is gamma region, this is alpha plus cementite, this is alpha plus gamma, and this is alpha plus cementite region. Anyways, so that means you understand, here I have written annealing and normalizing. So if you want to do normalizing and annealing of, this is the composition 0.8. So if you want to do normalizing and annealing of steel, which is of 0.8 weight percentage of carbon, then the transformation temperature is what? It should be above A1, like 40 degree, 50 degree above A1, right? This is A1 line. That means above lower critical temperature, 40 to 50 degree above lower critical temperature, right? If you want to do annealing or normalizing. But if you have a hypoeutectoid steel, this region, from here to this one, hypoeutectoid steel, then if you want to do normalizing and annealing of the steel, then what is the temperature? Can anybody tell me for a hypoeutectoid steel? If you want to do normalizing or annealing, what should be the temperature?
Above
Above A3. Very good. Above A3. This is the A3, or you can write AE3, right?
Yes, sir. Can you wind up? We have another class.
Yes.
So we have another
Okay.
class.
But suppose you want to do spheroidizing annealing, recrystallization annealing, or stress relieving annealing, then the temperature should be always below A1. It may be any kind of steel. It may be hypo or hyper, or maybe eutectoid. It is always below your A1. So can you people tell me, in this periodizing annealing, recrystallization annealing, and stress relieving annealing, and in between this full annealing and normalizing, what is the difference between the phase change or phase transformation? What is the difference between the phase transformation? Compare these three with these two. Compare these three heat treatments, periodizing annealing, recrystallization annealing, stress relieving annealing, with these two heat treatment, full annealing heat treatment or normalizing heat treatment, on the basis of phase transformation. Let me see who can figure it out. What I have told, for these three heat treatment process, the heating temperature is below A1. That is the hint. It is clearly indicating something about phase transformation. Again, another hint I can give you, above A1 for eutectoid steel, austenite is stable above A1. Below A1, it is unstable. Similarly, for hypoeutectoid steel, above A3, austenite is completely stable. Below A3, it is unstable, and below A1, it is completely unstable. I have given you enough hint. Okay, anyways, you can see in periodizing annealing, recrystallization annealing, stress relieving annealing, the temperature is below A1. So below A1 means there will be no phase transformation is happening. There is no phase transformation involved here, right? I think you people have got the answer. But if I'm talking about full annealing or normalizing, there will be a phase transformation. Initial phase is austenite, and if you cool it, it will transform into perlite or some other phase depending upon the rate of cooling, right? So phase transformation is involved in this case, but here there is no involvement of phase transformation because we are neither hitting above A1 or nor hitting above A3 or ACM, right? So that's why you have to remember in this kind of annealing processes, rate of cooling is not so important. For this one, rate of cooling is important because thermal stresses may be involved. But here in these two cases, rate of cooling is not so important. But in these cases, rate of cooling is very important. The rate of cooling will decide the phase transform, how the phase transformation will happen to coarser, finer, or to some other phases like that. Okay, I'll stop the class over here.